I've been trying to Nmap scan this IP address, but I can barely get any results back. I'm trying to find open ports so that I could interact with this server across the internet and fingerprint the attack surface just like any hacker or threat actor would. And I need your help here, because seriously, I've tried tons of different types of scans, but these automated tools, all the scanning tools and utilities, don't seem to find anything. And that's because this server is set up with Internet 2.0's cloaking firewall. And it's pretty slick. It works to mask, hide, and shield your infrastructure from external adversaries. We'll try as many different scans as we can in this video. We'll throw the kitchen sink, but it's practically hidden from the internet. Now, let me say straight up, this is a fully featured and dedicated video for our sponsor, Internet 2.0. But I think this tech is really cool. You can literally cloak your environment so it's less of an attack surface for hackers. I'll show it to you in action, and if you want to play along, there is a free interactive showcase just down below with the link in the video description. You can also download an ISO image if you'd like to experiment in a virtual environment or your hardware, or you can slap it up in the cloud with AWS. Anyway, say that I'm an attacker and I'm just scanning for new targets. I'm trying to spray and pray across the open internet and see what might be low-hanging fruit to compromise and exploit. Now, typically you do this with Nmap, the network mapping tool. So I'm inside of Kali Linux, I'm in my terminal here, and you saw me run this Nmap scan to scan this IP address, 3.9.15.241. If you'd like to experiment, you can run the very same thing, but now I'll try this in a dedicated testing instance. We'll try this up against 54.206.189.223. And I know I'm using the strict IP address here just for showcase, but obviously, if you were a threat actor and you were scanning with broad strokes like a whole subnet or a block of the internet, the results would be the very same. I hit enter here and Nmap is scanning, but I'm never seeing any results, and my IP address is probably already blocked. The cloaking firewall detected the scan, didn't let anything return, and then just banned me. This endpoint is, though, ultimately just a web server. It should be listening on port 80 and port 443, and I'll tell you a little bit behind the scenes. It's literally just a base Windows Server 2022 instance, with vanilla IIS installed and just a simple HTML page. There's no EDR or other fancy security tooling installed, it's just a flat cookie-cutter web server. So let's take a look at the management dashboard for the cloaking firewall, and let's see what happened just from our simple Nmap scan. I'm logged in here, and we've got a pretty cool display for all this. It's super dynamic and gives us visibility over just about everything. It is a firewall after all, so you've got tons of different settings here. Things you might be able to explore with the usual reporting, route settings, hey, maybe system information, different interface configuration, firewall groups, natting, rules and log files, etc., etc. I won't drag you down the rabbit hole with all that stuff, but I totally recommend you explore them and check them out with the free public showcase down below. Some that I do think are really interesting and worthwhile though, will start with the firewall live log view. This is literally a live feed of all the events that the cloaking firewall sees. This does get to be a lot though, so this page might slow down a little bit. If it ever does, you can toggle to the plain view log viewer and you still get all the same info, it just isn't as flashy and dynamic. That plain view is down below, but of course you could check it out with the overview, general info, anything. I'll hop back over to live view, and of course you can filter this here. You can narrow in on certain results and events, like if we wanted to only see the events for the WAN interface, where the interface is 01_WAN1, you know, the wide area network, like the internet. With that, we can see what traffic is trying to come in. We can toggle the drop down here to search for that, just as we did, or we could specify this with a specific direction. Whether that's inbound traffic or outbound traffic, that's just pretty neat. Now, another tidbit that I think is pretty cool, of course, the cloaking firewall includes an intrusion detection and prevention system, or IDPS. The dashboard exposes the event viewer, and we can click over to the different suricata rules that are loaded in. You can take a look through all these different pages, and the alerts over in another tab. Granted, this private instance doesn't have a lot firing off right now, so let me switch over to that public demo and let me see if there are any others. The public demo actually auto-populates the credentials, so it's super easy to log in, and it is just a read-only instance, and all the logs are cleared, and the whole thing is reset every 24 hours. But if we get back to the IDPS section, we can see what else might be going on. Do we have any alerts firing from just this thing getting hit up across the internet? Well, let me go back in time here, maybe from a previous day. Okay, a couple hits, yeah. External curl user agent, some web server scanning, look at that. This listing, just like the firewall log live view, is updated in near real time to a few seconds of accuracy. If you ever wanted to manually refresh or update this page though, you can just click that refresh and resync button. Here, of course, you have a search field and maybe a date picker, but ultimately, this IDPS is really geared towards preventing scanning and intelligence gathering on the protected infrastructure. And that is where the IP blocking system comes in. That's what stonewalled us just a little bit ago when we tried to scan with Nmap. Now, I'm back over in the private instance here, just for testing, but the cloaking firewall has a really cool code name for this, and I can't tell if it's pronounced Raiden or Raiden, I'll admit. Ultimately, it is the automatic blocking system that actively prevents and disrupts scans along with malicious activity. It monitors the firewall, and when it sees bad events, it places the offending IP address into the blocked IP address list. By default, this is blocked for about 10 minutes or 600 seconds. You can, of course, toggle the event threshold here, the ban time, any of the fields that you'd like to modify here, and actually view the allow listed IPs and the deny listed IPs, the ones that are blocked. If the bad IP address, like myself in the previous showcase, or a legitimate threat actor, if they were to trigger another offending event, then the ban time is extended. By default, another 10 minutes. The event threshold as to when it takes action is normally just set to 1, as you saw, but obviously you can tweak and tune this. Just one single instance of malicious activity helps take immediate action. Okay, last thing I want to show you, and then we can get back to scanning like crazy and seeing if we can get any hits. But I do want to give you some insight on how this is all done, how it's all put together. There is another page on the dashboard that we can explore that looks at the Nginx reverse proxy. That's down below in services for Nginx here. We can take a look at the configuration, maybe banned attempts, anything that we might be interested in. But super quick, let me show you some of the pages here because it does have some really sweet insight, especially in the report. We can go take a look at the health section, and that'll give us some nice usual graphs, all the visuals to be able to see how is our firewall doing, how's the endpoint, how's the device, how are we protecting our infrastructure. Super cool stuff here between the quality of the service here, traffic, VPN users, etc. The insight page is very slick. You can actually see the top usage of ports, hey, that are coming through and getting connections here, IP addresses in the mix, all the packets that are sent in, out, and the total. The traffic page actually gives us a very cool graph of the active communication, the network traffic going back and forth, and you can even see the top talkers in another tab here. That is based off the past couple time frame, and you can filter on what other interfaces you actually care about here. In this example, we are protecting a web server, right? So for our defenses with the cloaking firewall, we can actually get in the middle of that. I know this page doesn't have a lot to see visually, but I think it's super important on how the cloaking firewall really protects websites. We have Nginx in the mix, and it acts as a reverse proxy and a little bit of a web application firewall to help stop malicious activity. Now, I know that might already be familiar to you, but I think it's cool that Nginx can be used even to hide the website certificate. That can help prevent some certain information from being disclosed, like the server name or anything like that. It uses a different decoy certificate and then masks the real services for the web server itself. If a scan got through, like it was an address that wasn't blocked and some TCP tricks managed to get results, Nginx is configured to not return anything. It'll be blank. It's another piece of the puzzle that helps bolster your security with the cloaking firewall and protecting your infrastructure. And another good breadcrumb is actually DNS, the domain name system. By default, cloaking firewall is set up with Quad 9's DNS servers over DNS TLS, but you can configure it to use anything else and handle your own deny list and domain syncholling, the whole 9 yards. There's configuration here for DNS mask, as well as open DNS and unbound DNS. So a lot you can tinker and experiment with here. So holistically, the cloaking firewall is a whole system to defeat scans. and we'll put it to the test, just like any actual adversary and threat actor would. But this thing is super tuned with those IP threat intel feeds. It tracks active actors, and that archive is updated every 15 minutes with the list of known IP addresses that caused an event within the last 24 hours. There is an offset feed that tracks the suspected IP addresses that caused events within the last 3 days. Between those threat feeds, their Nginx tricks, and their IDPS and their Raiden blocker system, Cloaking Firewall is a formidable foe. When we tried scanning at the very start, we were blocked right away. And that is the goal ultimately, but I know that just closes the door, and you don't really get to see any more of the cloaking capability of the Cloaking Firewall. So for our demo, I'll actually showcase Nmap scanning against the public instance of the Cloaking Firewall, because that won't block our IP address right away. They do leave that accessible so that anyone can actually continue to work with it and try it out in the public demo. So we can go to that IP address, as you might remember, 3.9.15.241. Now, keep in mind, they are doing those clever certificate tricks to try to hide some of the server information, but if I accept the risk and continue, we can see the usual Cloaking Firewall. Now, they had their management interface over on the different port 2220. We can navigate there and follow through the same steps, and this will automatically populate with some demo credentials. They'll use anything in the range of demo 1 to demo 10, but we can go ahead and just simply click login. Now remember, the IDPS, or the Intrusion Detection and Prevention System, and Raiden or Raiden, that suite functionality, would allow or block different IP addresses. We could enter our own IP address here to add ourselves into the allow list, but don't forget, this public demo of the Cloaking Firewall won't actually block different IP addresses, so it can still prove and work with its features and functionality. If I try to scroll down to the save button, it is grayed out in this case. Obviously, your own instance, you could do whatever you'd like. So let me open up a terminal here, and I will full screen this, zoom in a little bit, and I will be running some privilege scans with Nmap, so I do want to get into sudo bash, so I'm running as root. We'll enter my password there, and I do have Nmap, as usual, running the latest version that I've got on my Kali instance, and just to make sure you know and trust I am in fact running Nmap, I'll give you the absolute path as well as the hash, so you can validate this is in fact the Nmap you'd expect. No tricks up my sleeve, it's real, the best showcase that I can. Now let's start scanning. We'll throw the kitchen sink. We'll try all the different SYN scan, TCP Connect scan, Fin scan, Christmas scan, whatever. We can even scan from Census and Shodan. And of course, you can validate this all yourself just as well because we're using that public instance. So let's start with that SYN mass scan. I'll use TAC S and capital S. We can specify the threads here just as well with TAC capital T and the number 4. We'll use verbose mode with TAC V. And we'll use TAC capital P and N to force and make sure it's treating it as that host being online. Let's enter that public IP address 3.9.15.241. Now I'll hit enter here and we'll do this sort of long form. I'll just leave like a time lapse of me genuinely waiting for the results to come back. This is the default scan of just the usual 1,000 ports that Nmap will hit by default. But let's see if the Cloaking Firewall works in this case and it hides its presence on the internet. Oh, looks like that scan is done. Here's the Nmap scan report for the public instance of the Cloaking Firewall. The host is up, as we were able to force with that TAC-PN argument. All 1,000 default ports scanned, but they're all in ignored state. It couldn't find anything open. It's not showing 1,000 filtered TCP ports where it couldn't make sense of it or didn't have a response. So, alright, it's doing what it should. Cloaking Firewall is hiding this thing. Let's see if we can do the very same with a TAC S capital T and a TCP port scan. I'll hit enter again and we'll see this in action. Alrighty, this scan has finished up, and once again, all 1,000 ports are in an ignored state, and it's not tracking anything down. No results, inconclusive, Cloaking Firewall working and doing what it should here. Let's keep this train going. We can try and run this with a TAC SF using the Fin scan. We'll hit enter here. And now this scan is done just as well. Once again, no findings. How about a null scan? We'll use TAC S and then capital N. And this one is done. Once again, host is up, all 1,000 scanned ports, everything being filtered, no response coming back from Nmap. All right, last scan that we'll run with these broad strokes here. Let's use TAC S capital X for a Christmas scan. Completed the Christmas scan at 1100. Once again, the default 1000 total ports, host is up, but everything in an ignored state, it can't quite track anything down. So this is awesome. This is, just as I mentioned, like every single kind of scan that we can think of, that I can think of anyway. Again, you can kick the tires too. I'm not seeing any results. This is, in my opinion, probably the most thorough test because look, if you're a threat actor, if you're an adversary, if you're a hacker doing whatever you do, when you start scanning across the open internet, you aren't specifying whatever specific port or any specific kind of thing. You're just trying to see where's the low-hanging fruit and what can I target? What's open and available? If you got no results, then you probably won't even target this thing. But let's say we had some more of that inside info. Let's say we were actually now going to drill down and get a little bit specific on one of the ports that we just happen to know is open, like port 80 as we saw, port 3 for HTTPS, or the management interface 20220. Let's start back at the start where we use TAC capital S for our SYN scan, and let's be aggressive here. Let's add that TAC capital A for a big aggressive scan and try all the Nmap scripting engines and enumerate services, detect the operating system, and all that host fingerprinting that Nmap can do. Let's hit enter, and there we go. It's trying to pull through this, but Nmap is seemingly struggling, trying to initiate the service scan, trying to go through the OS detection. Ooh, 20220 is filtered. It doesn't know what it is. The OS scan results seemingly unreliable, right? And it's trying to guess, given its best effort here, but it thinks it's whatever these things are, like a printer. Now let's try that with the TCP Connect scan. Let's do that once again. Now that still doesn't find anything. Really struggling with the OS detection. Once again, filtered and unknown on that port. Let's try something else. Let me switch this to port 443, HTTPS here. No dice. Cloak and Firewall still kicking in. Not tracking down port 443. Once again, that is a filtered result and nothing conclusive. We could keep trying different things here, like let's go use that null scan, that fin scan, that Christmas scan. Let's go with fin. Once again, hey, not getting the hit. No definitive results, just as well. 443 is noted as open or filtered, which isn't all that helpful, and the service it thinks is TCP wrapped, so it's not even tracking down like, oh, Nginx or HTTPS. Let's do this again. Let's fire up the null scan now. Nada, zilch, nothing. Same state, open or filtered, TCP wrapped, inconclusive, no real good operating system fingerprinting. So hey, just for good measure, let's wrap this thing up and finish it out with our Christmas scan. And alrighty, results coming back. Oh, actually got a little bit of detail here. It was able to track down the SSL certificate, some of the info there that was included, but don't forget that SSL certificate does have some secured information, all those tricks to mask and hide all the data and detail that might be behind it. Let me note, though, while we're wrapped up with some of the big mass scans and the single port filtered aggressive scans, look, let me keep in mind that I'm all connecting from the exact same IP address as I go through. So I could curl ifconfig.so, one of those online resources, just to rapidly see your public IP address. Now that has not changed as I have been scanning. But I did want to do one test here and go see, okay, what if I were to change my IP address? So I'm using Proton VPN over here, and let's say, I don't know, I'll connect to Canada. How about that? Once I'm connected, we can see a different IP address presented there. We can see that validated just as well in Cali, exact same IP. Now, if I were to do another one of those single port scans here, I'll use the TCP Connect scan, noting that I am coming from an entirely different IP address. I think this is where we find a little bit of a tidbit for Cloaking Firewall. I brought this to their attention and they agreed like, hey, you know what? You're right. This is a little bit of a gimmick because it's really, really hard. And this like naturally makes sense to me to differentiate this traffic, like one single port connection from an entirely new IP address that just looks like regular traffic. So the Cloaking Firewall has not yet kind of had a chance to make sense as to what's going on from that host, from that connecting IP. So this will track down and you can see, oh, discovered open port 443 on that host. Just like we kind of opened it up in our web browser. But I will say, I think this is kind of a very, very narrow scenario where, again, maybe, I don't know, there's an insider threat or the threat actor, adversary, or hacker just happens to know what specific ports are open, like 20220 or whatever, and they weren't doing their broad strokes mass scan. The broad strokes mass scan is significantly more likely and I think more realistic for actual threats in the real world. But we did want to be upfront, and Cloaking Firewall, Internet 2.0 told me the very same. Look, we want to own this because it is something that they're working on. They do have a fix and a solution on the way. Once this scan completes, you can see that there are some results here. Okay, tracking down SSL, HTTP, and Nginx. Can't actually track down the HTTP title though, and of course the operating system scan and all the fingerprinting, still not really having any luck. But if I were to look at my IP address once again, that has not changed, and if I were to scan it once again, well, now that Cloaking Firewall's got a little bit smarter and knowing, okay, what that host and that IP address is up to, it'll hide and cloak itself once again, with no results for port 443 coming back. With all that said, again, I think it's pretty unlikely that this is a scenario because a threat actor is going to do their mass scanning first and then figure out, okay, what ports will they drill down into to do the aggressive service scan, fingerprinting, etc. Just a note here, if I switch to an entirely different IP address, we'll hop over to Mexico real quick. You can see my new IP, 84242, curl ifconfig will tell us the very same. If I were to do a usual mass default scan here, don't need to use aggressive mode, just, hey, trying to see what's out there, that won't end up tracking down those ports. Scan complete, no findings, still want to include that just to note all the strengths and weaknesses here. I do want to be sure to include the Census and Shodan scan just as well though. So look, if we go ahead and search for that public IP address of the public demo for the Cloaking Firewall 3.9.15.241, searching for this thing, it gives no info, no publicly accessible services. I will mention though, in the history, previously as this thing was spun up, hey, probably building it all out, it did include the 20.220.443 and other insight here, but right now, that's not going to give any other details when you take a look at the ports that are open. If you spin up your own Cloaking Firewall, you won't have that history because, hey, now it's in action and it's going to be totally cloaked. Can do the very same over on Shodan. Let me search for 3.9.15.241. We'll go ahead and click that to search. Coming back, no results found. Now that may very well mean that they just don't have the insight there, but if we were to actually get back to our terminal over in Kali, I can use the Shodan command line tool, like to work with their API, and I do have that initialized to work, and I could go ahead and submit a new scan for 3.9.15.241. It'll fire it up, you'll see it'll start a new Shodan scan, but no open ports found. Or the host has been recently crawled and can't get scanned again so soon. So look at that. In just about all the scenarios we could explore, Cloaking Firewall works fine. We are hiding our attack surface from the internet. That's pretty cool. Threat actors rely on having the information about their target and their target's attack surface. Nmap is the go-to tool for finding those ports and services on the open internet. And of course, other tools like Nmap, but if you fundamentally cannot see what is there, then you don't know what to do to attack it, or even that you would attack it in the first place. Preventing even just network scans is one thing you can do to board up the windows and improve your security posture. And look, if you want to kick the tires, if you want to play with it, seriously, take a look. You can spin it up with just a link in the video description or AWS. Use a local ISO if you want. It's all super easy. Check him out below if you want to see more of Internet 2.0's Cloaking Firewall. And with that, big thanks to Internet 2.0 for sponsoring this video and their support of the channel. I think their tech is pretty neat. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for letting me showcase it a bit and do the demo. And if you enjoyed it, please do all those YouTube algorithm things. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.